Welcome to The Power Within, the podcast where we explore leadership, personal growth, and the dynamics that shape success. I'm Keith Power, and each week I sit down with inspiring individuals who share insights on leading with impact, building resilience, and unlocking potential. Through their experiences, we'll uncover the mindset and strategies that drive meaningful growth. Whether you're looking to evolve as a leader or gain new perspectives, this podcast is here to guide you. Today on The Power Within, I'm joined by Souhila Keffi, a compensation advisor, coach, and founder of The Pay Edge, as we explore more stories of resilience, growth, and the power of determination. Souhila has spent nearly 20 years working across Europe and Asia, helping respected brands, including AWS, build fair and competitive pay practices. She knows the system inside out, and she's seen, time and again, how talented people hold themselves back when it comes to asking for what they're worth. That's why she created the Pay Edge, to help professionals and founders understand their true value, speak up with confidence, and negotiate fair pay. Drawing on her experience in compensation strategy and HR, she now supports clients to rewrite the money conversation, from corporate roles to business owners setting their rates. In today's episode, we'll explore what really shapes who gets heard and who gets rewarded, and how we can all step forward with more clarity, courage, and fairness. Okay, Souhila.
Hello.
Welcome to The Power Within.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And I know you're heading off on a longish holiday tomorrow, so thank you for making the time during your final 24 hours. You're packed, I presume?
No, I'm not,
Okay.
but it's fine. Doesn't need to be something I do well ahead of time.
Perfect.
I like adrenaline.
Oh, there we go. Oh, we'll bring out some adrenaline now. So let's dive straight in, shall we? Your career spans consulting, finance, tech, and now leadership coaching and pay equity, which I think is what our listeners and viewers will be most interested in. What was the moment that sparked this unique pivot?
I think, yes, you can say it's a quite unique pivot, because I think I am maybe the only compensation expert who works in the space of salary negotiation coaching. My story is essentially that I started my career in consulting, where I got exposed to a lot of, strategies for companies to retain talent, how to drive performance, how to encourage the right behaviors. And that was all very, very exciting.
But that's the other side of the fence. You've jumped over now, right?
Exactly. But I'll tell you why and how this happened. I loved corporate, and I never planned to leave corporate. But what I have noticed in working in compensation is that while companies have made a lot of progress on pay equity and putting in place sophisticated system, there is a gap in how people show up at the negotiation table. Meaning that a lot of people are afraid to negotiate because they don't have the knowledge, because they are afraid, they have a fear of not being perceived well, a fear of damaging their...
losing the opportunity.
Absolutely. Losing the opportunity is one, or, appearing as ungrateful. The company took care of me. It's inappropriate to ask for a raise.
Okay.
And there are also other people who are very confident, but they can damage their positioning from not asking in the right way.
Okay.
There is a very big gap between the intention from corporates to reduce pay gap and, the level of, proficiency in negotiation.
Right.
Which I think is really what I'm trying to address with, the Pay Edge. It's how to help people to master that part, because at the end of the day, negotiation is still going to be there.
Yep.
Companies have to negotiate because they compete for talent and they have no choice, right? You can't just say, this is the number and this is how much I'm going to pay you. And, we are putting aside all your past experiences or your uniqueness because our salary structure says this is the number. No, there's always margin for negotiation. Right. To address that, I think there is some work to be done around supporting people in removing the fear, in understanding compensation better, in understanding how to ask, how to frame your request in a way that's going to be, well received. And that's not going to position you as ungrateful or greedy.
But you said companies have that space for negotiation and don't just put a number out there. However, 2 times in my career, I've been in just such a position. And that's not to do with the company or the human resources, but more to do with the ego of the hiring manager. So one of them was an internal promotion, and I was basically told, that's it, there's no negotiation. And I stupidly accepted it and had to go back to negotiating 1.5 years later, where I was successful in getting a 25% raise, which means I left it on the table in the first place. And the second one was when I took a role where it was an external company and they just said, that's it. And I accepted it again. And I'm not a shrinking violet and I'm not a fearful person, but I did take that as being, that's it. How would you suggest someone deals with just there's the offer and that's it?
Okay, so before I respond to that, I want to ask you, what was behind that's it? Did you get any, clarity on where they were coming from? Because there might be a rationale. Mm. There may be, there may not be. It really depends on...
There were 2 different scenarios. Mm-hmm. And the first one, by their manager's ego. No question in my mind. I know now because I accelerated past him in the promotion stakes. And he's just a blunt guy. And that's it. So it's a personality thing. The second one perhaps was much more to do with the fact that I'd probably stretched their budget already with my request early on.
Okay, which means you negotiated in a certain way.
Prior negotiation, but when it came to it, that's it, basically.
And that's okay, I think at the end of the day, what matters the most is to understand, is to ask questions, is to uncover the reasons why they are not able to offer you more. And, there are ways to ask and to really find out whether you are actually leaving money on the table or if this is really what it is.
Yeah.
And it is important for an employee to know that, especially when they are starting a new job. You want to start on the right foot, right? You want to make sure that you get that understanding. At the end of the day, it's all about transparency. I believe that pay transparency is a big game changer in the corporate world, in the sense that it reduces the frustration.
On both sides.
On both sides. Mm-hmm. If you are ready to have that open conversation, whether you are a manager or an employee, and put everything on the table and explain how compensation works in that particular company, what is doable, what is not doable, why, what is the rationale behind it, then everyone is happier, because if you don't understand compensation, you start assuming.
Yes.
And you make up stories. You start to question your worth because obviously money is a very personal topic.
Yeah. And emotional.
Very, very emotional. And so you start to question, why are they potentially paying this person more? Because they think this person deserves more. So you make it about your personal value, and that's a dangerous path, right?
Okay.
Because it eventually affects your engagement. It affects how you show up at work. It's potentially something that can hold your performance back as well. When in the first place, compensation is meant to drive the right behaviors that drive performance, that, deliver the company strategy.
There's a lot to unpackage there.
Yes, and before you ask your next question, I just want to go back to that manager with a strong ego.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is quite a common situation, which When I was on the corporate side, we worked on that to try and address how managers behave in salary conversation,
They're
because
maverick sometimes.
we cannot control a person's personality.
Yes, yes.
Right? Yeah. I think companies are doing a good job and can still do, some work around equipping the managers with the right tools, with the right information, and the right mindset to approach salary conversations. It's not just about how the employee shows up. It's also about the managers.
Yep.
How do they convey the messages? Do they understand the company compensation philosophy in the first place, and are they the right ambassadors? I appreciate that managers are not compensation experts, and hence they need to be trained the same way they are trained on other topics,
Or step back and let professionals manage that aspect of the process, perhaps.
Yes and no, there are pros and cons, but if you want to create a culture of pay transparency, it's very important that anyone is able to discuss it in an open manner, and hence having the managers trained is probably the best way to do that.
And I hope to goodness that my old manager doesn't recognize himself here. Let's move on. You've lived and worked across Europe and Asia. How has that global lens shaped your views on leadership, power, and human potential?
My career is very interesting in the sense that I started as a consultant in a major HR consultancy in Paris. I worked there for 5 years. I thought I was the queen of the world. I was managing big international projects, international coordination, 15 countries. Like, I'm thinking about a project for a massive German pharmaceutical company where I had to reach out to consultants, our internal consultants in 50 countries, and have them, deliver some high-level benchmarks for strategic, talents in that company. And I thought, because I was having those regular interactions with the international community, I understood culture.
Right.
I had a German client. I had to adapt to their needs and, to being, very data-oriented. And then I moved to Hong Kong.
And it all changed.
It was a big slap in my face. It took me a while to realize that I brought my French/assertive cultural background at work, and it didn't always land very well. It took me quite some time to build that awareness and to realize that there's a lot that I need to unlearn. So the first realization was, wow, this is not working. Before I come in and give my technical advice, I need to build trust, I need to build relationships, I need to take it slowly, basically, and not be that loud, because loud is not necessarily valued.
Yeah. Not in Asia,
It
right.
sounds like it resonates for you.
Parts of Asia. Oh, it resonates, absolutely. This period of adjustment for you, was that weeks, months, years in understanding?
It's still work in progress.
Oh, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
That's an honest answer,
Yeah.
right? Simple things, there are cultural differences. In Singapore, where we are now, there's an expectation when you go for a job to share proof of your last drawn salary. In some countries, that would be anathema, just absolutely not a question they ask. I've been on both sides as well, like you. And on the one side, if you're on the employer side, the only reason you want to know that is, A, can you afford this candidate? And then B, if you can I pay less than I planned to? Basically, right? So transparency, you talk about, can be good, but if it's one way, it's not so good.
It's not so good, and it's unfair.
Right, absolutely.
Because it puts you in a weak position. When I came to Asia and when I asked to share my last drawn salary, I just tried to blend in and follow what was asked from me.
Okay.
I now think that it's something that we should absolutely not do. And this is what I advise my clients, actually. They are very respectful ways of pushing back on this request, because I think it sets you up for failure.
So everyone from Asia listening to this now they're hanging on your next words. How do you push back in such a scenario where culturally there's an expectation of you sharing that? How do you push back?
I think it's important to understand why your past salary shouldn't define your future salary.
Okay.
If you are switching jobs, very likely you're going to work for a different company with a different context,
Yep.
in a different role, maybe a different scope, and a different culture, a different compensation philosophy, a different, way to benchmark salaries. And as such, I think it's absolutely irrelevant to refer to your past salary. The reason why you are switching jobs in the first place, or maybe not in the first place, but one of the reasons why is to bump your salary up.
For sure. You don't generally move to take your salary down, right? Generally.
No. And you're taking a risk somehow, and you want that risk to be compensated. Now, I'm not saying that every job move should be compensated higher, but I think this is part of everyone's career strategy.
Yes.
It's fair to say that you should expect a bump in your pay. If the company is looking at your past salary as the reference, it anchors the negotiation to the wrong level, right, based on the wrong role, wrong company, wrong compensation structure.
So how do you push back politely?
There are many different ways of doing this, and of course you have to adapt it to the context. But one way to do that in a very polite manner would be, if asked early in the interview process, is to say, listen, this is too early for me. I prefer to not share my past salary, but focus on the role that I am interviewing for, because it's quite different. And once I get clarity on the role, the responsibilities, the scope, then I would be happy, to discuss the salary.
The salary, not necessarily my salary, the salary.
The salary.
That's the key. So a little bit of a swerve, but also you're setting the expectation for the future negotiation anyway. Okay, subtle, sounds very psychological, but yep, very logical.
It's all about psychology.
Absolutely. And the sooner you wake up to that, the easier life is. That just took many years to realize that all the time. Back to you personally and what you've developed. You've developed frameworks, the 3M for founders: mindset, model, message, and the edge for corporate employees. What led you to create these, and why does it deliver such powerful results?
Salary conversations or pricing strategy for founders is always very emotional. And people tend to tie, their identity to their salary or their pricing.
And ego again.
And psychology. And I built a framework for founders, which is mindset. So you work on your mindset first, then you model your pricing based on what you offer to your clients and what you deliver. And lastly, you work on how to frame your message. The reason why I did this is because I noticed that mindset is the biggest hurdle for founders, but they don't necessarily realize it.
Okay.
And I like to use the metaphor of a house where the mindset is your foundation. Your model, your pricing model is the structure of the house, and the message is basically the interior design.
Okay.
And many really focus on the structure and the design when the foundation is not. They don't get the foundation right, and it cannot work. A lot of founders feel resentful, frustrated, underpaid, because they over-deliver, because they have this mindset that a client is a client.
Right.
Or the mindset that if I charge too much, then I might lose that client. But, there needs to be alignment between what you deliver and, how much you charge, how much you price.
Of course.
I see so many founders that have the best business strategy. They work very hard on marketing and branding and, their programs, their products. But when it comes to pricing, they have a weakness. And my job is to really help them uncover what's holding them back and help them, give themselves permission to charge more if this is aligned with, what they are offering their clients. So that's on the founder side. I think what's really essential here is, again, the psychological side of pricing and detaching your identity from what you offer. It's really about reframing the fact that it's a commercial transaction. It's not about you. You are not your pricing. A client says no.
Stepping back from the emotion and making it more of an objective process then, right?
Yes. And that requires some reflection. Mm-hmm. That requires some reframing. And sometimes it takes time because the reasons that are holding people back on the topic of money can be multiple. Some are deeply ingrained in their childhood. Yeah. Salary conversations for corporate employees are pretty much the same. Your worth is attached to how much you get paid. And you can have a lot of limiting beliefs around pay, right? So it's a process that's intimidating, that's emotional, and hence I created this framework, EDGE, which stands for, evaluate, really understand the situation, the context, the market, then design, how do you tell your story, how do you show your impact, etc. Ground for G, how do you ground yourself, how do you not get emotional in the conversation, really, and how do you convey your message? And finally, elevate, how do you elevate that conversation, how do you learn from it, and how do you build the negotiation muscle that's going to serve you throughout your career. So the idea with creating those frameworks is really to create a step-by-step roadmap to something that can feel very fuzzy, very intimidating, and to remove the fear from it, literally based on all the patterns that I have seen over and over again with founders and corporate employees.
It seems the more difficult one to address, which means you need to spend more time on it, is the emotional, the personal. The rest you can accept are a process, but getting someone to convince themselves they need to adjust their emotional state to an objective state, probably the area that they need to spend the most time on, and you probably end up spending the most time on, I'm presuming, right?
Yes, because the minute you unlock that, everything falls in place.
Everything falls. It's a bit like if you get the foundations right on a home, the rest is relatively easy. You follow the plan. The hardest bit is digging and setting the foundations.
That's the reason why I studied coaching, basically. Because I could have started the Pay Edge with the intention to help my clients understand their market value, build a negotiation strategy, but that's insufficient. In my view, the full package is, evaluate your market, understand what's your worth, but also reflect and practice and learn.
As humans, our most difficult aspect is reflecting, which we both, as coaches, know. That's our job, to help people to reflect. As soon as they take the time to reflect, to stop, to look in the mirror, to really assess, then it unlocks so much.
Yeah.
Tatler Asia, you highlighted a striking statistic. 57% of men negotiate their starting salary versus just 7% of women. How do you help women rewrite their story?
This is a shocking statistics, but sadly...
Very shocking.
It's the reality. It's a research that has been done by a very serious university in the US. I'm not sure it reflects, the wordly trend, but I think it's striking enough to make us realize that there is a disconnect. There is a gap in the way women advocate for themselves versus men. Women have been socially conditioned to be agreeable historically. Right. We all know that.
No one told my wife that. Oh, I'm dead.
Well, you're lucky then. One thing that they don't necessarily realize, but also because they are not taught how to, is that this gap compounds over, their career. So if you fail to negotiate your starting salary, it will affect your bonus, because many times the bonus is calculated as a percentage of base pay. It will affect your retirement,
Wow.
savings. If you think about it, the impact that this small negotiation or conversation at the beginning of your career can have is massive. And it's not just a financial impact. It's also the fact that the earlier you start negotiating, the better you get at it. And so
Right.
if you build that habit early in your career, then it becomes easier and easier and
You
easier.
hone the skill.
You own the skill. If you don't negotiate, what might happen in your next conversation around salary, maybe 5 years later, is, again, you might fail to negotiate. It's never too late to learn. And I always say that negotiation is a skill. It's not a personality trait. And that's the reason why I do what I do, really. I want people to realize that it's within their reach.
You need to help them to reset their thinking towards this, basically, right? Away from the conditioned way that they've approached things previously. That is still hard because it is so hardwired in us, how we are. But I was still shocked by the statistics, really. I knew there'd be a gap, and that is a terrible admission for a man to make, right? But that it's so huge. And we can talk all day about the gender gap, but this indicates that women are partially responsible themselves personally for that gap, for not stepping up, not advocating for themselves, and not negotiating, right?
So I'll rephrase a little bit what you just said. I think that the gender pay gap is mostly a systematic issue and a cultural issue that's going to take time to go away. But hopefully, things are going in the right...
That part we're agreed on, but this part is new to me.
So what I think is that women have a lever to influence their compensation.
Right.
And that is salary conversations. I'm not saying they're going to close the pay gap by, showing up, advocating for themselves, owning their value and knowing what their market value is. But it's going to help.
For sure.
It's definitely going to help because when you have the courage to, work on your limiting beliefs and, get prepared and strategize around the salary conversation because you understand how this is affecting your financial security, you are also paving the way for other women. You are normalizing those conversations. And it's really starting to close the gender pay gap one conversation at a time.
Okay, your platform, The Pay Edge, tackles compensation clarity, and we've come from transparency. What inspired it, and how is it changing the way people think about pay?
So what inspired it is really that disconnect between, what companies are trying to achieve with their compensation systems versus how people show up in the conversations. And the importance also to acknowledge that compensation is a high factor of dissatisfaction at work, meaning that if you're not happy in your job, whether it's because of your relationship with your manager, because of your, responsibilities, the content of the job, etc., those frustrations might crystallize around compensation.
Okay.
If you are able to increase your compensation, your dissatisfaction reduces, but your satisfaction doesn't necessarily go up.
You still have to address the other issues.
Absolutely. Before addressing those other issues, I feel that it's very important that people feel aligned with their comp. And, we see a lot of people going through burnout. We hear a lot about quiet quitting, and these phenomena can be addressed with this clarity around compensation. It's a win-win for employers and for employees. If you have employees who are ready to have that pay conversation with, clarity, courage, then it really creates a safe environment. It creates trust. It creates engagement. it reduces the frustration. And I think both employers and employees benefit from that. And that's why I think it's very important to make those conversations normal, to equip employees to have those conversations and feel better. And sometimes, what I observed with some of my clients is that maybe the company is not the right fit.
I'm a firm advocate on doing something. If you recognize something's wrong, whether it's your pay, the job, your colleagues, your boss, do something about it. Whatever, move it on. But so we often see people who are successful from the outside, but they are still undervalued and or underpaid. Where should they start to reclaim their power?
People that feel undervalued, unfortunately, it's something that's quite common, and it's very sad. And it's something that, if some of our listeners feel undervalued, I want them to know that they're not alone.
Okay.
And that it's a pretty common thing. And like you said, if you have that feeling, the starting point from my perspective is really to try and understand, where is this coming from? Is this truly my comp?
Yeah.
Is this something else? Is this a lack of recognition altogether? Is this that I'm not in the right job or the right company? Maybe a cultural mismatch. So there could be so many reasons why employees are feeling undervalued. And that's, where the psychological aspect comes in. So the starting point is my salary. But when you dig further, you might come to the conclusion that it's something completely different.
The difference between being satisfied and being dissatisfied. If pay is not right, it's a dissatisfier. But if the other aspects are wrong and then you put the pay right, it doesn't mean you're satisfied. You stop this one dissatisfaction, right?
Absolutely.
You've also said that pricing is a proxy for power. This is the power within, by the way. What mindset shifts do you see leaders and founders struggle with most around their self-worth and value?
So first of all, the reason why I say pricing is a proxy for power is really because from a founder standpoint, I think it truly signals your worth to your clients. If you charge too low for what you deliver, it sends the wrong message.
Yes.
And it attracts the wrong clients, right? The biggest mindset trap that I see for founders, again, is this personal rejection thing, attaching their identity to their pricing. Like a client pushes back or a client tries to negotiate a fee, means that I am not worth that amount of money. And that can be very painful for them.
But that's just a feeling, right? It may be real, it may not be.
At the end of the day, it's, clients would try to negotiate. They're not questioning your worth.
Okay.
They're just trying to get the most out of a transaction,
right,
which is fair in, a commercial relationship.
So again, separate yourself from the emotional part.
Yeah.
Again.
It
keeps
always,
coming back to this. Right?
Always.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And for corporate employees, it's the same, really. Is, this company has taken care of me. They're offering me a promotion. How can I ask for a salary? How is this going to affect the relationship with my manager? Yeah. So for the other thing that I see a lot is, if I work hard, then the rewards will come.
That's just dreaming. Let's be honest about that, right?
Yes. It may come, but it may not come. And you may have to take action. And it's basically putting yourself back in the driver's seat. You are in the driver's seat of your own career. Like, you cannot delegate that power to someone else, whether it's your manager, your HR, or anyone else.
You. Let's switch back to companies again, because we've focused a lot on individuals, which I'm sure everyone watching this will be that focused on. But when you work with companies on pay strategy, how do you then balance fairness, competitiveness, and inclusion, especially for returners, people who've left and are coming back?
I think the first part is really having a clear compensation philosophy, which means, as a company, and based on the strategy that you're trying to deliver, and the culture that you are trying to have, then what do you want to encourage with your compensation? And your compensation systems can have different objectives. So, for example, when I was in consulting, I worked on a massive regional revamp of a bonus plan for a luxury company. So the compensation philosophy of that company obviously is not going to be the same as the compensation philosophy of a fast-paced retail company.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So you want to encourage quality, client service,
Yes.
and this has to be reflected in your philosophy. Do we encourage short-term versus long-term incentive? There's a lot of things that are the continuation basically of your philosophy. It really sets the baseline of how pay decisions should be made in your company. That's the first very important requirement. Then, assessing market is also, very important because it will define your competitiveness. So ensuring that you use the right benchmarks, that you contextualize market data, that you adapt it to your context, to your company context. When you create the salary ranges, I don't want to go too technical, but essentially, then comes the fairness part. How do we ensure fairness when, like I said earlier, different individuals come with different levels of confidence?
Fairness doesn't necessarily equate to equality. That's often mixed up. I got a 10-year-old and 7-year-old daughters, and I treat them differently. I don't treat them the same, but I do try to treat them fairly. Explaining that is a challenge.
It is, and that's why we need to explain it to employees too.
Right.
If you have two candidates who are applying for a role in a tech company, and one of them has experience in machine learning, which is a very sought after skill, then obviously they're not going to get the same salary as the other candidate.
Got you.
And that's fair.
But needs to be explained, perhaps.
Needs to be explained, and it needs to be acknowledged in the philosophy, maybe, So how to ensure fairness is by ensuring that you check internal equity whenever you hire someone. And this is something that we try in companies to do in a consistent manner. There is the market competitiveness, but there is also where they sit in their salary range compared to peers, and whether it makes sense to pay them more. If yes, why? Right. There has to be that thought process in place when, negotiating salary with employees.
All this keeps coming out, all of this transparency and openness. We need to peel it back, basically.
It's very opaque.
Yeah.
Different companies have different levels of maturity when it comes to pay transparency. But in some companies, compensation is still a black box.
Worse than that, in some companies, even talking about it might make you subject to disciplinary action, talking to someone about your salary package. But this is because the openness wasn't there in the first place, so the explanations weren't given earlier on to show the differentials. Why are there differences? If it's a simple job and it's a repetitive job in a factory or whatever, it's simple. This is the pay, this is what it's for. But when you get into more complex roles requiring a lot more thought process, the differences are marked sometimes, subtle in other ways, but overall, they make for a big difference. They can make for a big difference in what the company is prepared to pay an individual for a role.
I agree with you, and I think that underlines the importance of knowing your story. What makes me unique? Okay. What impact do I bring? What do I bring to the table? And when you come prepared in an interview process, demonstrating what you have achieved in your past roles and what you are able to achieve in this, a new role, it really gives you credibility. Sometimes it's not about your capability, it's really about your ability to tell your story.
Oh, for sure. Which was my next question, because you said about pricing problems are often alignment issues, not mathematical ones. Can you share an example then of just that as helping someone shift their narrative and their strategy?
Yeah, I can share the example of a client case. I'm not breaching confidentiality because my client is fine with me sharing their story. Just to protect her confidentiality, I'm going to call her Anna.
Okay.
So Anna was working in a corporate environment. She got promoted, big regional role, great responsibilities. She worked really hard for a long period of time and was waiting for this to come.
Okay.
But when it came, the salary increase was very, very minimal. No increase in bonus, no equity, nothing. So she came to me with a big frustration. And in starting that conversation, what we realized was it was more of an identity problem than a money problem.
Okay.
Because her identity is, I'm going to work really, really, really hard. And, hard work always gets rewarded. So it really took a lot of time to get her to see her mindset made her somehow negotiate against herself.
Oh, right.
And that loyalty is good, but remaining silent is not a form of loyalty. And that, by speaking up, you are creating healthy boundaries and healthy relationships with your company that are going to help you make this role more sustainable, have this relationship be better. It really took some time. It really took some time to work on that reframe. And once we did that, it was really about understanding her job, what she brings to the table that someone doesn't, why she was chosen for this promotion, how her her salary compares with, whether it's peers or the external market. So really building a strong negotiation strategy. And we also worked a lot on role play, scripts, practice.
Okay. Yeah.
Because when you practice, your brain is getting used to being in this situation. It's not as emotional, not as stressful as as if it's the first time you're having that discussion. And so it really helped her build that confidence, ground herself. And what's very interesting is that she was able to have a very healthy, calm, grounded conversation.
Without showing the emotion.
Without showing the emotion, she also needs to believe that she's worth it. Yeah. If she doesn't believe it, then who is going to believe it?
For sure.
Right?
A takeaway from that, not everyone is going to be in a high enough paying role with respect to turn to someone like you. But one thing I've drawn from that if I were looking, I've never done it, but I see the value in role playing an interview with a colleague, a friend, someone you trust, someone who will give you good feedback. And I'd never done this, but the negotiation part. So that, as you said, when you practice and practice and practice, it just becomes a process, a discussion. It's not emotional anymore, and it's not a stranger. So your psychology, the way we think is, this is normal. It's not a stress situation to react to in a stressed way, which is when you usually fall apart, right? So in my coaching, I'm going to take that away and tell my clients that if you're facing a negotiation at work or an interview, role play.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to be the one, right? Of course, they'd be better off coming to you. But if they can't do that for practical reasons or financial reasons, I think role play is a very, very valuable step-by-step process that will make it feel more comfortable.
Yeah, you build muscle memory. But I have to tell you, and what I tell my clients all the time is a negotiation cannot be scripted. So we rehearse, we practice, we try different scenarios, but you still need to think on your feet when you are negotiating. It's just making this situation a bit more familiar for your brain, really.
Even if you get 80% of it, you only need to think on your feet for 20% instead of 100%.
Absolutely.
You're a darn sight further in front, right? So you coach women returning to work after career breaks. Men generally don't take career breaks because it's usually wrapped around childcare. That's changing, but very slowly. But you work and coach women returning to work after their career breaks. These are a group who are often sidelined. What's your top advice for them to regain confidence and traction? Because that's often what's missing when they return to work, is confidence. They may have been the super confident head of marketing for Asia Pacific, they've been out of the work environment, the corporate environment for 2 or 3 years. The confidence has slipped now. How do you help a woman in that situation?
This is extremely common. Unfortunately, I see that a lot. So not only the confidence goes down, but many women returning to work after a break would carry a form of guilt.
Against, for the children, for the family, for the workplace, or
so when you show up in an interview and you need to justify your career break,
okay, got you.
Many women don't feel comfortable. They feel, guilty of stepping away because of, all the implications, which many times are stories that they tell themselves. The industry is moving fast. I've lost my momentum. I need to relearn so many things because I forgot how we do these things, which is absolutely not true, right?
It's nonsense.
Like riding a bicycle.
These are, as we said earlier, self-limiting beliefs, right?
Completely. Yeah, absolutely. So they carry a guilt. And the problem with this guilt is that it's preventing them from showing up as, confident. Many times they are ready to take a pay cut just to get a foot in the door, which is a very bad strategy because the long-term consequence of this is that they end up being underpaid.
I want to stop you there because this is a core lesson to take away. Returning after a few years out to accept a lower salary. Not only are you going back in on a lower salary, but you're going to compound that over time and you perhaps will never catch up. Just by positioning yourself like that, you're putting yourself in a weak negotiating position and you're diminishing your confidence level. So I'm going to say, as a man, women, stand up for yourself, ask for your worth. That's it, right?
It's not that easy, but yes, I agree with you. And, I think we should always negotiate from value and not from need.
Okay.
But when you return from a career break, when you feel guilty about it, when you have lost your confidence, many times you negotiate from need or you don't negotiate at all. You accept a job with lower responsibilities, a lower salary. The advice that I give around that is really to own your break. What did you learn during that break? Did you develop any leadership skills that, can be valued? And essentially, we should see it as something positive. Many women during their career breaks develop skills that no one else has the opportunity
Certainly
to.
multitasking improves.
Multitasking is one. I have a client, for example, who stepped away for 1 year and a half, which is nothing in a career if you think about it, to take care of her dying mother. Oh. So first she was sick and then she passed away. And, the resilience that she has built in that period of time, taking care of her family, her kids, while, training on the side because she didn't want to lose track of what's happening in the corporate world. This is massive.
Yes, it is.
And there's definitely ways to value that. So it's really about owning your story, being confident that it's okay.
Before owning your story, you've got to set within yourself what your story is and say, this is going to be my story. We talk about an elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is your story condensed. But you have your story, it's an authentic one. It's not a created one. But unless you talk to yourself, have a conversation with yourself and set the story, you can't share your story.
And that's where, coaching or reflection comes in.
Yeah.
What have you learned during that period? What strength have you developed? What are some skills that are transferable in a corporate setting, that you will be able to reuse? And so by doing this reflection work, you really start to believe in your worth and the fact that, at the end of the day, that break was not such a bad thing. And it's serving me in my career and how I show up as a leader.
Every experience is an experience and it's a learning. If you go back to that lady, I think you said it was a lady whose mother was dying, you'd hope that if they're in a managerial position, a leadership position, when they come back, one thing they will have developed in that time is an empathy for other people and understanding. Sometimes you've been a tough manager, you've learned there's this other side that things happen. you can come back as a better manager. But again, it's about incorporating this into your story, whatever that story is. And when you said that, we talked about women returning to work because it's usually around childbirth and childcare. But there are other reasons to step away from work. And one of them could be an ill or dying relative, right? He recognized himself because I had an exchange just last week with someone who had moved from Australia to Singapore to take on a regional role working for me. And at the time, his father was taken ill. Thankfully, recovered for a while, but he passed away a few weeks ago. And he reflected then on how my empathetic approach to him at that time, more or less encouraging him to return to Australia, rather than standing in his way and being selfish about the business, I had learned that from my own experience. I probably would have been a more hard-nosed leader if I'd not experienced that myself. But his thanks to me on LinkedIn the other day was still a little bit warm into my heart. Sad his father's passed away, but the time he had with him was so valuable. And he returned to the workplace, right? Like, you only have one mum and one dad. Far more important than any job, even paid negotiations.
I agree. That's a beautiful story. And I think, we need to normalize this. It's okay to prioritize your personal/family needs when you have to. And it's not it's always a temporary, most of the time it's a temporary thing, and it's okay. It should be accepted in our society, that. And employers also have some work to do around that, recruiters.
No recruiters. I think, again, we started earlier on talking about ego and individual managers. It's individuals, because you have a corporate workplace, you have policies, processes, procedures, etc., but these are delivered by leaders and managers who are individuals. And that's where the learning gap is. I think organizations kind of know what to do. It's a question of training and creating the right environment for the people to learn about that, right?
And reducing bias.
We all have biases.
We all do.
100%. They could be around race, culture, age, environment, anything and everything. We all have biases that are a result of our upbringing and our experiences. Being alert to your biases is a start to overcoming them and putting them aside. I don't believe in this strip it all away and measure people, just on paper, because when you're hiring someone, it's still relationships, how they communicate, all of these things matter. And there are some biases within different cultures and also within different workspaces. Like if you're working in the luxury space versus the cheap and cheerful, there are biases, but they're valid. But be aware of them and choose accordingly. Don't be blinded by your biases, right?
Be intentional about your biases.
But that sounds terrible. But yes, I know, right? I can't disagree with what you said. I knew this would be a good interview. When I say a good interview, it will be an interview that will resonate with people, because everybody wishes that they could negotiate better for their pay. You've just demonstrated today why that is so important, especially this compounding effect, that if you get it wrong at the beginning, it continues to be wrong over a long period of time. So leave us with one pearl of wisdom that you'd share to anybody who is facing either an interview for a new job or a promotion at work, and they want to get the best salary they can. What's the one thing you'd leave them with?
So if you wish to have a pay conversation, whether it's salary or pricing, don't put it off.
Right?
You will never feel ready. You just have to start somewhere and build that muscle.
It's that old book. There's a book which I know it's read mostly by females, but I read it, called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yeah, you can never remove the fear.
No.
You will always fear approaching such conversations. And there's no courage without fear, right?
Oh, I love that saying. On that, we'll close. And this is going to be the first episode of Series 2 of The Power Within. I'm so glad to have been joined by you, Souhila. Wish you well on your travels.
Thank you.
Enjoy your time. Speak soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope this resonates with your listeners. And it really was an absolute pleasure to have that conversation with you, Keith.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Power Within. I hope today's episode inspired you to grow, lead, and create the success you deserve. If you enjoyed the podcast, share it with someone who might find it valuable. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Join us next time as we explore more stories of leadership and personal growth. And remember that setbacks are just stepping stones to something greater. Until then, stay strong, stay positive, and keep believing in the power within.